Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. Andy, great podcast on tap tonight. We are joined, as is annual tradition, by our good friend, Captain Jack Andrews of Unabated. The annual tradition I'm referring to, of course, is the 4th anniversary now of effectively the PASPA repeal, which, honestly, 4 years? What? Yeah. This has been 4 years. I've done a couple of interviews lately where people ask, how'd you get started doing this? And I said out loud, like, oh yeah, 2016 I started to, I don't know, oh my God. And not only are we now far removed from this being a thing, but the pandemic itself makes before time feel like infinity years ago. Like it is like years and years and years have gone on here.
Time got weird.
Yeah, time got weird for a little bit. The last couple of these, we were just joking off the air. The last couple of these were different because we were reflecting on the state of the industry in the midst of a global pandemic. Here we are now, kind of coming out of it. We are on the heels of an absolutely wild football season in terms of expenditure by the sportsbooks landscape. The kind of predictions about where we're going from here are going to be all over, wider range of distributions than I ever thought we would have here 4 years in. So without further ado, welcome back to the Deep Dive, Captain Jack Andrews.
Hey, thanks, guys. So 4th anniversary is, I believe, fruit or I forget what the other flowers, fruit or flowers. So I didn't get you flowers or fruit. So,
I'll expect an edible arrangement on my desk.
Oh, that would have been great.
I got one of those from a vendor one time, and I came back to my office. What the hell is this? The guy's like a fruit boat that you eat. This is the worst.
Yeah. Well, nowadays, if you're looking for current favor in this industry, it costs you a lot more than an edible fruit basket, Andy.
Yes, it does.
Because this is competitive space, and we are. It has been a very weird year. Ultimately, and how things have played out. As according to your notes, which you sent us, and much appreciated for that, we have 31 legalized states and jurisdictions right now in the United States where you can make a bet. That's over half last time I counted. And yet it still feels like we got a long way to go before there really is sort of widespread sports betting in the United States. Is that generally your read on things, Captain?
Yeah, you would think after 30 states or so, we'd say, oh, we finally got this right. But the states continue to just trip over themselves. And I think I've said it every year that I've been here, is that the states continue to trip over themselves in rolling this out. And we have yet to find the perfect state model. And it's sort of disconcerting at this point. I don't think we're ever going to get it right. It's just going to have to be, we always sort of shake our fist at the clouds and say, oh, this could have been better. I think that's just our fate.
Utah's just biding their time, and they're waiting. They're making everyone else make the mistakes, and so we're going to get it just right
in the year 2150.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I mean it is interesting, and that's the thing that you see a lot of. And some of the content you put out, or just you're tweeting, you and Fonz too, just some of the guys that are not only just reporting on it, but following it out of just a general interest. You see, like, what decision, and it's always come back to money, right? Like all these bad decisions, somebody was either given bad advice about this is going to be more money for us, or they didn't get the right consultants in there, and they said this is going to be more money. Because I think a lot of you go to like college football and be like, oh, why did they do this way for the the national title game or the bowl season? Like, because they make a boatload of money and they know it. Like there's a lot of money there. But I think a lot of these are like, hey, we did this because we're greedy, but it actually was the wrong decision. We could have made more money a different way. I think there's like 10 states like that where it's like,
sure,
you're just limiting your tax revenues by screwing things up this way.
Yeah, it comes down to, I've talked to a lot of regulators. I've talked to a lot of legislators over the years, and a lot of them say, well, it depends on what kind of industry you want to build. Do you want to build a competitive industry where volume will become scale, and then whatever tax rate you put on it will help grow that industry and become a market in your environment? Or do you want to treat this as a sin tax and just tax it heavily with very few operators? Don't really give the consumers a capitalistic market to work in, just something that, gets them where they want to be in terms of being able to place a bet, and treat it that way. And that dichotomy of the two different ways that states are treating gambling, and especially sports gambling, it's night and day. Are you treating it like it's a market where people can possibly win, or are you treating it as an entertainment tax where you're going to lose, so here you just got to pay your dues?
Okay, so when you got into this and the political side of things in particular, were you cynical going into it, or have you moved the needle in either way? Like, oh my God, this is so much harder than I ever realized to do it right. Or have you been like kind of pleasantly surprised by the people who are in power are not entirely making decisions simply on the basis of what is best for them and their bottom line?
I'm probably more cynical now than I was before, but I'm also hopeful that these laws are not necessarily written in stone in a lot of states. New Jersey made one crucial mistake when they legalized, is they made it so that it was the constitutional amendment, and it required basically passing an amendment to the Constitution to change much of anything. And that's why we still can't wager on New Jersey schools or events happening in New Jersey at a collegiate level, because they couldn't push that amendment back through the ballot referendums. So I'm a little bit hopeful that some states still have the opportunity to get it right, even though they've done poorly so far. And we're starting to see with New York, for instance, this 51% tax. Well, the operators are now saying it's untenable. And yeah, no duh, it's absolutely untenable. And there's going to be pushback and enough that maybe they'll modify that. Maybe they'll change to make it a competitive industry in New York. But I'm also more cynical than I was, because there are still all these new states that think they have to reinvent the wheel every time they bring up sports betting. Look, there's plenty of good patterns to follow here. You don't have to constantly be coming up with a new way to do it. There's billions of dollars being wagered in some of these states. Just copy that, and you'll probably get billions of dollars wagered.
If you pick the best parts of like a few of the states who aren't doing it horribly, like you'd be not. I think, and you said no one's doing it perfectly. I don't think anyone ever does anything perfectly. You can look at any industry. There's flaws in every industry, every part of life, really. I mean, we've seen that with. Go look at how the logistics and shipping industry got hit with the pandemic thing. Just like fail safes aren't there for certain things, and there's always things that are screwed up. But it is wild, the thing with New Jersey. I keep forgetting that. So like, if they wanted to make a change, they would need to have a ballot measure that would have to be voted on and pass.
Yeah, and they did this past November 2021. They had
I remember that
to remove that line item that said that you can't place a bet on a collegiate game played in New Jersey or any New Jersey team competing anywhere. And it had no chance of passing because the sports books didn't spend any money lobbying for it. They just don't care. And the constituents were like, we're already getting tons of the commercials, of this FanDuel, DraftKings commercials all the time. Therefore, we don't want more commercials. So let's not vote in favor of more sports betting. But look, they're going to have to do it again because in 2025, I think it is, the NCAA men's tournament regional finals are in Newark. And so that's going to be
might be a good catalyst to actually get people
right.
Because I mean, it's like what you said, when the initial ballot measure was there, you can get people to the polls. Say like, if you vote on this initiative, we can have legalized sports betting. Oh yeah, we can be one of the first to do it. Like that could get people up and voting. But like, hey, you guys, we really, really want you to be able to bet on Monmouth football. And, if you want to bet on the Rutgers game this weekend, or, it's funny. We had St. Peter's make a run. Like New Jersey got some shine there, but St. Peter's, Jersey, right?
Yeah.
I'm not wrong. I had to think of, there's the tri-state schools are such a mess. They're all right in there, but yeah, it's hard to sell that. Hey, we need to get out to the polls so we can, so you can add 11 more teams to the 340 college basketball teams you can bet.
So,
it's a tough sell.
yeah. So is it fair to say that there is still a refusal to sort of learn, use lessons learned for new states?
Oh, absolutely. And we're seeing it with a lot of these states that are just now getting to it. You guys both live in one of those states. But we're seeing it. The major thing we're seeing in the Midwest states, it is, we know gambling is kind of bad, so therefore we don't want to encourage, irresponsible, bad gambling, problem gambling, things like that. Well, the problem is people in the Midwest are betting on sports, whether you have it legal or not. Andy can attest to this. They're either driving to your neighboring states and getting their bets in a regulated market, or they're betting offshore, or they're betting through locals. That's not going to stop problem gambling. That's not going to stop bad gambling behavior. What it's actually going to do is limit the amount of funds that are being siphoned from a successful industry to treat problem gambling. Nevada's made this mistake for decades. Is the state that spends the least per revenue on problem gambling initiatives is Nevada. And the reason they do so is because problem gamblers aren't their problem. At the end of the weekend, they put them on a plane, they send them back to some other state to deal with. So there's actually not a lot of need for problem gambling reform in Nevada. I think some of these other states are kind of doing that right now. The people that are coming to New Jersey to bet are going back to New York and Pennsylvania at the end of the weekend. At least they were. Now there's legal betting in both those jurisdictions. But the thing is, they are no longer kind of having to deal with it. And some of these new states better realize that, their people are betting and their people are running into problem gambling scenarios, whether they like it or not. So they might as well legalize it to at least tax it and treat it.
Okay. So if it's fair to say that the new states aren't going to learn from the lessons of other states, they're going to learn the hard way themselves. And are there examples to this point where a state, maybe it is New York, set up something poorly and is actively trying to make it better along the way? And what is it? Does it take a champion within the government who is really trying to improve things, and an impetus of the government broadly to make it succeed in order to kind of effectively change and tweak things and
there has to be some numbers guys
for everything?
Yeah, I mean, there has to be some numbers guys who just look at maybe it's part of their job. Maybe they're an accountant who works for, one of these jurisdictions and can see where the money's going on something like this, and then maybe can see numbers from other states or just better run states. There has to be somebody who just realizes this is horrible, how we've set this up with this tax rate and the amount of operators that we're going to limit here. I don't know, that one of the ones I think, and you joked or didn't joke, I mean, it's actually happening. I drive to Iowa sometimes if there's a really good line on a legal book I want. And, I feel like Iowa, and if you ignore how Illinois did with the mobile betting flip-flop back and forth, I feel like those two aren't horrible setups as far as they have a lot of operators. They have completely mobile sign up at this point, and the tax rate isn't bad. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Iowa's tax rate isn't horrid, but of course it's Iowa.
Yeah, no, those are examples of decent states. Illinois is getting there. I mean, Illinois should really be the market leader across the country. They have the highest population of any legalized gambling state outside of New York. They should really be the ones pulling in $1 billion in handle each month, but they're not, because they had that stupid in-person registration rule and they have a limit on the number of operators. But they've done a decent job. So back to Drew's original question of, does it take a champion in the state? Yeah, it kind of does. And here's the problem is we're still very lobbyist driven. It's very cheap to buy a state legislator to do your bidding. And they've all been bought and they've all been, they've done their job. And now they say, okay, I'm on to the next lobbyist who wants a piece here. Nobody's circling back and going, okay, how do I make this better? Because they've already done the job that they were paid to do. That's why I always wanted to have a consumer voice, is because the things that are good for the consumer are never even considered. They're never even brought up.
Sure.
And it's just so frustrating. So you really got to fall backwards into a good state setup. And each state along the way has some really good things and some lousy things. Here's a good example for Andy. Minnesota, they were right on the cusp this week. The House passed sports betting. The Senate declined. The House sports betting bill had a 10% tax rate, and that tax rate was going to fund the regulatory process, problem gambling, and some kind of youth initiative thing. All right, 10% of revenue in a state the size of Minnesota, population-wise, that's not going to fund the regulatory, let alone all those other things as well. So that tax rate was probably too low. And the reason that Minnesota didn't pass is because the tribes wanted exclusivity of sports betting. And in Minnesota, you have both tribal and you have racetracks. And they don't want to work together because the tribals want the exclusivity. And the House, enough people were on the tribe side. And in the Senate, enough people were on the racetrack side. And it won't get done this year.
Yeah, it's been kind of messy up here with that. And you talk about it has to make sense at the end of the day if you're trying to fund the regulatory. There's a lot of costs associated with this. It's not just some hit a button and collect free money for these states. They got to fund. The tax rates are not just there to fund other things. You got to fund the regulatory, and obviously, if you don't have to fund any problem gambling stuff, but boy, that would be nice if you want to, keep your state nice. And I know, to be fair, the tribes do a pretty good job with some of the problem gambling stuff up here, but it's wild that the Racino has that much power or has that many lobbyists. It's funny you talk about the lobbyists. Once they get their job done, they're just on. It's like full music, man. I'm just here to sell my wares and I'm gone. And why would they care after something gets done? So it does, to Drew's point, if things got done via a mercenary, like you said, and then things happened and, nothing so bad that enough people mind, what is going to change? Why would anything change? So what do you think? Just before, I'd love to hear you talk about California, because that is the prize jewel. That's the prize jewel at this point, because Florida's still.
Well, I think even if you take the 31 states, that's still not half the country population wise, because we're missing California, Texas, and Florida, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now getting New York was big, and Illinois is there, but Ohio's not legalized, correct?
They're legal, but they're not started yet.
Yeah, so getting Ohio, getting California, Texas, Florida, that kind of swings the scales, even if you don't get a bunch of the flyover states. But Minnesota, what's the end solution there? Just a higher tax rate so they can actually fund it with we have 10 votes, 10 electoral votes. That's how big the state is. If you want to reference for anyone who doesn't know their state populations, it's not tiny, but it's certainly not a big state by any means.
Yeah. Here's the thing. The tribes are going to need to learn that they need to work with the other stakeholders. And we're going to learn that when we talk about California as well. Yeah. The states where they've done that, sports betting has been successful and they've benefited from it. They want exclusivity. They've always kind of had exclusivity in gaming because of IGRA, the Indian Gaming Regulation Act of 1982 or something like that. So they kind of always assume that they need exclusivity in order to survive. And that's what they're going to be telling the citizens of California. And it's not necessarily true. They can work together with other stakeholders. Look, sports betting is all mobile if done correctly. And so, why not have a piece of that? Why not have exclusivity, or why not have exclusivity, but instead have this large melting pot and go after the big brand names to be associated with your tribe? That's how you're going to get the most market share. The other thing we're seeing with a lot of these tribes is they cheap out when it comes to pairing up in these markets, and they all tend to use Canby, and we kind of know how that goes for a lot of these books.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple questions on California specifically.
Last one on Minnesota that Drew. It's that I'm still just so surprised that the Canterbury, let's just call it Canterbury, that's the track. That they have any swing compared to just Google it quick, Drew. Google who's the richest Native American tribe in the country, and there's different ways to measure it. What?
It's got to be the Seminoles.
No, it is the Minnewakanans up in Minnesota. Yeah,
I would have said the Seminoles too.
I'm sure Seminoles are up there. They're top 5, but Minnewacan and like the Mystic Lake is massive. That is a huge casino hotel. They have a lot of swing up here. I thought they could just kind of bowl people over with their money and influence and just make it whatever they wanted to have. And not like they're bad folks. I love that casino, but I just thought they wouldn't get much resistance. So that's super interesting. I might have to actually pick up a newspaper around here once in a while, see what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, Google says you're right. So then pivoting a little bit to California and a couple of specific questions. I've heard lots of different theories and takes, and honestly, like the day-to-day coverage for even someone who lives in California would be directly impacted by this. I'm like,
I've heard more about your California stuff than I've heard about my Minnesota stuff, Drew. For sure.
My general 2 cents is whatever they came up with in the first place as a compromise to get the Indian, the Indian tribes on board, Native American tribes on board, didn't satisfy the card room folks, and the card room folks were like, we're going to nuke ourselves to defeat this from a ad spend campaign, and then they came up with something else that was another kind of lame attempt at a compromise. But ultimately the hard part to getting the Native American buy-in has been iGaming. Is that correct? Like they effectively see why will anyone come to our casinos and play the casino games if they can just sit on their phone and do it at home? And that's sort of their the boogeyman for them in terms of participating in any of this at all. Is that fair?
Yes, that's pretty fair. Look, okay, to explain California, you got to kind of do a little bit of history. So California has over 50 tribes, and they have over 100 tribal casinos in the state. Big economic picture. Then there's those card rooms, and the card rooms have always been a little bit shady. They get busted by the feds every couple of years. Sure. There's always something going on in the card rooms. And then you have the racetracks. You have some really traditional top-tier racetracks in California. And horse racing, for whatever reason, is still gambling royalty in this country. And so they always need to be included or subsidized in some way. And then you have the sports leagues and the teams. And California's got a ton of teams. So there's a lot of stakeholders here. Now, the tribes believe they should have exclusivity in California. And they also are afraid, as you said, that if there is mobile betting and mobile gaming, nobody is going to want to ever come to their casinos. But they also have this situation where under IGRA, they're not allowed to have mobile betting unless there is some kind of compromise worked out with the state where there are multiple stakeholders. So they could work out something with the California Compact and have mobile betting that is run by both tribes as well as racetracks and sports leagues. And, everybody gets a sports book, and there'd probably still be many more to be had. But they don't want that, because that would make them have to compete directly with all of those other entities. And the last thing they ever want is the card rooms to get a piece of anything. Those two factions just hate each other.
Sure.
So you have this kind of war going against each other. And so the tribals have decided that, okay, the only way we can do sports betting and keep our exclusivity is do in-person only betting at the casinos. And we have enough casinos throughout the state that'll be no problem. Well, yeah, except tribal land in California is in faraway places typically. And so a lot of these tribal casinos are, a 2-hour drive for a lot of Californians. It's not a very good idea. So in come the major corporations of sports betting, the DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, so on and so forth. And they pushed through enough signatures to get their ballot referendum on for November. And what their referendum says is you can offer mobile sports betting in California if you operate in 10 other states, and if you put up $100 million as your licensing fee. And
seems steep.
Yeah, well, it's a barrier to entry, Andy. That's exactly what it is. It's meant to make sure that the only companies that can afford to do this are the 5 companies that are sponsoring this bill. Obviously a smaller operator like Circa could never
Monarch
afford
ain't getting in there.
Yeah, they can never afford $100 million, let alone operating in 10 other states to get a license in California. It's a total poison pill, because here's what it's going to do. is there's going to be other operators that say, oh, I'll just buy up enough operators that I'm operating in 10 states. And there's going to be mass consolidation in other parts of the country as a result of this California bill. So what's going to happen between now and November in California is the tribes and the sportsbook operators are going to fight to the death. And literally, we've seen how these tribal casinos fight when they fight. They should be on gambling Twitter because they are just vicious,
They probably
vitriolic about every little.
They're anonymous
exception.
though.
Yeah, they're just all about winning. Okay, so they're going to have ads nonstop. The operators are obviously going to have ads nonstop. But here's the irony of all of this: these two ballot referendums are not one versus the other. They're two separate ballot referendums. There's a chance that both will pass. There's a chance that neither will pass. So it could be that the voters of California say, yes, tribal casinos can have sports betting. And yes, we can have mobile betting through these other operators. That would be bad for the tribes because at that point, there's going to be mobile betting in the state, which means eventually there's going to be iCasino and iGaming in the state, and they won't have a piece of it. So that's the worst thing that could happen. Now, if the tribes get their way and their bill succeeds, their referendum succeeds, but the corporate bill does not, guess who's going to run the sports betting operations at these tribal casinos? DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM.
Operators.
So all these same people that they just fought to the death with, or they're going to be fighting to the death with for the next 6 months, are the same guys that they're going to go back and go, oh, okay, let's join forces now.
It worked on Yellowstone. I've seen it. You can switch sides. And you said the thing that stuck out to me. There's 100 tribes, like you said. Is there some sort of coalition? Like, are they working together pretty hand in hand on all this? Is there a consensus?
Yeah.
Or at least the ones that matter, the ones with the more power, more money, more members. So it sounds like it's a pretty united front as far as the tribal members go in California.
Yeah, so there's really only 5 tribes that matter in California. The rest are small enough that they get pushed around by what the 5 power tribes want. San Manuel, Viejos, I forget, anyway, I forget my tribe.
The Morongo, the Pechanga, and whatever.
Right, Morongo. Yeah. Those 5 make all the rules. They kind of control the whole thing in California. Some of those tribes are small. They got one little rinky-dink tribal casino in Northern California somewhere. It's for the most part, it's 5 tribes that control everything in California.
The iGaming thing, I had a question regarding what you've seen in states that have either tribal or, they could, what do you call non-tribal casinos? Where like Iowa, we have a Boyd. We have
commercial casinos.
They're just commercial. So, I think you have a nice mix of that between some of these legalized states that do have iGaming. Like, has there anyone been able to prove, like, hey, guess what? You can play iCasino in Michigan. Nobody's going to the casino anymore. Like, there can't be any like blips in the radar. People, it's not the same. Like, playing cards on your phone sucks. I want to go roll dice by hand.
Yeah, I'll tell you. And look, in New Jersey, we've had online casinos since 2013. It's a pretty good experience, and it's also, you don't have at home. You don't have smokers nearby. You don't have annoying people. You don't have, people asking you for money. You don't have to tip the dealer. It's all these things, and you get really easy access to your cash. Like it's literally like dink dink. Okay, there's another 1,000. Dink dink. There's another 1,000. And they'll extend they'll just check your bank account, and you can bet up to all of your bank account. It's really easy to bet over your head when it comes to online gambling. And I've said all along, look, I've seen it here in New Jersey. You have no idea how bad this is going to be for some people. Like, this is, lose everything, jump off a building bad. And it's going to be a pandemic across the country once this starts to roll through, and we're going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to up the whole problem gambling game. We're going to be what the UK is right now, where they're making it so you have to prove that you have discretionary income. You have to show that you have extra income that you can wager with. You have to basically prove that you can afford to gamble.
It did sound like right away when you said that, I'm like, well, this is going to be really good for problem gamblers. All of that sounds horrible. Like, there's no cocktail waitresses though either. No tickets to,
Plus the game's rigged, so
honestly, I think there's a good portion. I bet if you polled people who regularly play cards, dice, roulette, whatever at the casino, if you polled them, like, do you think there's a chance that this is a fair game that you're playing on your phone? Like after they lose, it after they lose $1,000 at blackjack. Be like, no, he was pulling 21s out of his ass. It's a computer. It's rigged.
I'm sure the house edge is bigger than some games you can find other places in person, right?
Actually, the house edge is almost always lower with online games because they don't have all the overhead they have to pay for. So you get full pay video poker. Blackjack is always 3-2. It's never 6-5 or worse
Plus,
than that.
The churn is probably a hell of a lot higher too.
Well, they can they don't have to shuffle. They can get a lot of hands per hour in.
Yeah. Okay.
No, it's a little depressing to think about how this might all go for the country if this gets really steamrolling. Yeah.
Well, let's assume that all of the California stuff goes belly up because everybody's spending to defeat each other, and everybody the way California props tend to work is people are like, they word them like extremely poorly. Either on purpose or by accident. Like they're just impossible to communicate what you're actually voting for. And even if it sounds good, people are like, well, I don't know. It doesn't sound right. I'm going to vote no. But let's just assume that nothing gets passed. Is there any real momentum in a state like California to actually do something? Because the state right now has like a absolutely massive budget surplus. It's not like we're not really existing in the same sort of macro environment that we were a couple of years ago, where it was like these states need revenue. They need to freaking figure something out. Like California right now is flush, and we have lots of other bigger problems to deal with. Notably wildfire problems and climate change problems, but that's for another day. I guess, do you get the sense that if things don't go well this cycle for big states like California, we could be looking at a longer wait to actually get any of this resolved?
Drew, I don't, simply because California is seen as this gold mine for sport, for everything, for casino gambling in any sense. And everyone is anxious to get the gold out of the mine right now. There's going to be continued pressure from the tribes, continued pressure from the operators. And let's not forget about Vegas. Vegas still has, that's their biggest feeder market. So they want to make sure that people don't stop coming to Vegas from California. So they're going to have a little bit of influence here too. I think it's inevitable that California legalizes betting and iGaming in some form or fashion in the next 2-3 years. It's just a matter of like who's left holding the bag for it. And, I don't know. I don't know who's going to win that fight. It remains to be seen.
Does that, and you kind of articulated why California is such an edge case, because Christ, there's gold in them their hills. Like there's so many people, there's so much money to be made. It doesn't matter. But like, does a budget surplus like that, a state who's doing well, does that affect this? So I was going to say, I just saw that in the news the other day too. Like we had a budget surplus. They're trying to, it's always funny when politicians have to figure out how to spend extra money, because it feels like they're not going to have your best interests at heart. Although there is a chance that Minnesotans are just getting like a random, what do they go, a stimmy check. Everybody, but it's been a long time. The last time I think we got those, they called them Jesse checks because it was Jesse Ventura. If you want to date how long ago, I don't even think I got one. I wasn't of age, but does that affect like how a state's doing financially, as far as if they care about this?
It affects the tax rate that they're going to put on the industry, probably, because they need to raise money if they're needing money, or if they don't need the money, so to speak, then they can earmark those funds to something else. Look, Kansas recently legalized, and the whole reason that they pushed it through is because they're going to use 80% of the money to lure the Kansas City Chiefs to switch over to the Kansas side of the river versus being in Missouri. So yeah, it
money well spent.
It's still going to be the operators and the tribes and the stakeholders that are going to be pushing for it. It's just a matter, can you find the legislator to back your plan. And since in California you need ballot referendums to get things like this done in the first place, that's the first hurdle. And then it comes, figuring out how the regulators want to make the laws in California. But I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon.
Years and years ago, I remember there was sort of a working theory that like once the snowball rolling downhill gets enough states involved, that the federal level will have to just do something about this and normalize it across the United States. It doesn't feel like we're anywhere close to that. Am I crazy?
We're not close this year, but I really think we're going to hear a lot about it next year. Gambling is a divisive issue, and politicians know you don't bring up divisive issues in election years. So 2020, 2022, and 2024, no way. 2021, you're still fresh in that presidential term, but 2023, the third year where it's an off year, anything goes. And I have a feeling we're going to see somebody push it through. Chuck Schumer has been talking about it out of New York. He got bipartisan support the last time he talked about it, and luckily it just fell apart back in 2019. Again, third year of a cycle. So I think 2023 we hear about it. If we survive that, then we're good until 2027.
It sounds like you're pessimistic though if that happens.
I would rather have a situation here where I can travel to another state and still have choices, rather than it be some kind of federal blanket setup where, there's only so many operators allowed or so many things, I would rather have that choice of traveling to a different state. I guess, sort of sounds like abortion law or something, right?
I was just going to say, if we can talk about rolling back abortion law, what's going to stop them from messing with the federal regulations that we have here? I do like that they, even though we've, spent 40 minutes ragging on how the states are screwing everything up, I do like that they left the states to their own devices on a lot of this. I like the choices, and I like to see some states do a good job with this.
There's a lot of politicians that believe that same thing, Andy, that state rights, that gambling is a state right issue and always will be. And I think that's why we have not seen any framework in Washington about marijuana legalization, even though it's technically illegal on the federal level. There hasn't been any kind of talk of enforcement of any kind, because there's too many politicians on both sides that believe that that's a state rights issue. Same with gambling.
Well, I mean, so much precedent was just set based on state lotteries, state casino laws, anything else. Like in Minnesota, we have pull tabs. That's a full state-run thing. It's state by state. I don't understand all the rules with gambling. Like, we're not allowed to have craps in Minnesota. It's the nutlow. It's so bad, but everybody does have that's another reason. Like, it doesn't matter what you do. Somebody's going to pop to another state. That's the only reason to go to Iowa. It's because you can play craps down there. But
yeah, at Florida, you can't have any games with dice or balls.
Yeah. Same thing here. No roulette as well. So that's why there's a string of casinos on that northern border. Catch all the dice players as they roll over.
Interesting. So another aspect that I'm dying to get your takes on. Last year during the football season, the ad spend by these operators, which was relatively concentrated, by the way, in legal jurisdictional areas. Like, I did not see a ton of ads in my neck of the woods outside of the big time national stuff.
Wow.
And
you're lucky.
But then you go on vacation, or you happen to be in a state where it was legal, and you watch the game and you're just like, holy crap. Like, this is rough. And they were spending something. I mean, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but the ad spend was with a B last year in the football season, which means they were in like the tens of millions of dollars every single weekend. And I mean, if we're writing articles for ESPN, David Purdum's article was awesome about the kind of the Black Swan event that happened. And they were like, people were, these operators are freaking out about a $10 million decision, but they're spending $80 million a weekend on ads. Like, something ain't adding up here in general. And, like, this must not be sustainable. Am I crazy?
Yeah, no, it's definitely not sustainable. And I'm not sure how it's sustained, how long it has. I don't get it. this is a low margin business, guys, right? I mean, right?
think.
You know,
You would think.
Well, you find yourself with the same game parlay, and all of a sudden the
Well,
margin doesn't.
so
It does, and
that's
they I think they've concentrated the advertising towards like, hey, we found what high volume looks like or high margin looks like, and we're gonna start concentrating on that because, like to Drew's point, not only the spend, but what they spent it on and who they spent it on. It felt like they just hired some kid out of college and said, pick a spokesman, we'll pay him. We don't care as long as we've heard of him. And then we hired Drew Brees, and Drew Brees is a nice guy, I'm sure. But like those were horrible. Like that wasn't moving any needles. Like no one's signing up because Drew Brees is in an ad for it. Like they just pissed money away on this stuff.
Yeah, there was actually a quote for today, just a couple hours ago, from the DraftKings CFO who said, "Going forward, we're gonna just focus on same game parlay." In other words, they're like you might be able to bet sides and totals at DraftKings, but what they really would like you to do is just everything's the same game parlay all the time. It's at 30% hold for the sports books. Of course they want that. But you know what? If you offer something with a 30% hold, you know what you don't have after a while is customers with money. You just chew them up and you spit them out and they're gone forever.
I'll push back on that a little bit because if you're pivoting in that direction, you're writing dollar bets. You're not writing $100 bets anymore. Like, you know, you're literally just saying like, hey, we're effectively selling scratchers now.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what you're doing. And it's also, it's not so much that everybody will be broke. It's that they'll just be so disgusted by the fact that they never win. You know, anyone who plays a lot of scratchers, the only reason they get addicted is because sometimes they win. And some of these same game parlay techniques that they're using of like 5,000 to 1, you know, great. That's a great lottery ticket for you, but it really should pay about 15,000 to 1 or even higher than that.
Yeah.
And since the consumer doesn't know that and they just get obliterated in betting them, they eventually just say, you know, well, screw that. I'm not going to play these what turn out to be scratch lottery.
I promise you the next innovation is literally like do a 10-leg parlay, and if you hit 5, you get 5x. If you hit 6, you get 6x.
Yeah,
if you hit 10, then you get the full payout, right? Like they're going to start giving incremental, like you did okay, you didn't win it, but
well, you already have the parlay insurance. It's
Yeah.
just building off that, and it is like to Jack's point, knowing the odds, and even, you know, maybe a little brother to this would be the one-way futures market, where with the infinite hold, because you don't see the other side. Well, I mean, you don't, but you can go to another book who has a two-way market, or you can take a good guess and say, like, this is roughly, you know, how bad I'm getting jobbed on this market. With these super high correlated parlays, where honestly, it would take some very, very like the 1% of the 1% of the gambling math community to actually figure out like the level of correlation between these and how bad you're getting screwed. Like there's nobody has time for that in these parlays. Like you yeah, I know, but like to get even just close, like is an accomplishment for sure, Jack. But like knowing most of these people just never will know like how much these should actually pay, because it's an incredible amount of work to actually figure out, you know, the correlation and how much they should cut the odds. And I think they've just kind of, I'd love to sit in one of those meetings at a sports book where they decide how this works, be like, here's roughly what we think the correlation is, just double that, and those are the odds.
Yeah, no, look, Rufus and I have had many conversations about this. We would love to have a product, and we're still working towards it, that blows the curtain back on same game parlay. We'll tell you how much it's correlated. We'll tell you what it should pay. We'll tell you, you know, this same game parlay is actually profitable because they've screwed up the correlation, that sort of thing. The sports books would hate us. And that, you know, for me, I love that. There's nothing that's like the strongest heroin I could possibly get is to have sports books hate me. But yeah, you know, we're still working towards that. Look, we talked to Deck Prism. Deck Prism actually developed that and then realized that like that wasn't the market they wanted to be in. So they never put their product out to market, but it can be done. And I would love to create a product that just kind of blows the lid off of something that's just so, I'm not going to say it's predatory, but it kind of is, guys. It's basically make
all of this
people believe that.
Well,
I'm long past looking in the
yeah, I mean,
thing.
and Patrick in the
Am I
chat here
getting-
says,
yeah,
I think Patrick was
Yeah.
kind of building on a point of where I said, nobody knows what the odds are, and he says, nor do people care. I mean, a big to do just yesterday or the day before was the cousin Sal tweet where it was supposed to be tongue in cheek. It wasn't as tongue in cheek as I think he'd probably hoped it was for it to come off, and like that sort of stuff can get real gray area. And everyone was getting so mad about that tweet. And the thing I noticed first is like, fuck, there's not even odds for this parlay. Like, what does this parlay pay? Everyone's getting so mad about what he said in the tweet. Have we become so price insensitive as a gambling community? We don't even need to know what this parlay pays. You're just going to show me 4 things, tell me to parlay that. Nowhere on there it said what the odds were.
Well, you know why they don't show that is because, and yes, I know they're a sponsor up there in the corner, but what FanDuel does is the more people that play these same exact lines lowers the payout.
Oh wow!
It's just the same way any market works. You can't. Once you take liability, you have to move it. I have seen
the lines; they only move the payout.
Yeah, I have seen that too. With they do have some of these, some of the bigger operators. They'll have these promo parlays where it's a static price. Like that's what I would want to see. Like if you're going to make a big promo parlay, I don't care what kind of liability you take on it. It should just be a static price at least, even if it's a shitty static price, or you estimate, hey, like 90,000 people are going to bet this parlay. This is where we're going to want it at for average odds. Just find that and give it a static price. Like that bugs me that there was no number.
I'll be honest with you. All of this seems like a very dangerous way to be doing business. If this is as big of a gold mine as everybody thinks it is, and the gold rush and all these terminology, all the kind of discussion around this is correct, then just go freaking write bets. Like this shouldn't be that hard to like figure out a way to make a profit.
Yeah, you got plus 110 guys, plus 115 out of
hard. So which brings me to kind of the customer acquisition part of this. Like, was last football season the bite at the apple where CPA was $1,000 per customer, whatever the hell it was, some insane number, and now like we've acquired who we're going to acquire in the states where it's legal, and until we have a new state, like we're not really spending that anymore? Or is it like they literally like are going to churn, because they're going to churn people out who they acquired for big dollars if this is sort of the business that they want to run? We all, your point was correct, and for a lot of people who are there like, this isn't fun. I'm just losing and losing and losing. Like, I'm not going to redeposit, right? Like that'll churn some people out. Like, where are we in the ultimate arc of the customer acquisition space here for these operators?
I think we've passed the peak of the gold rush for the consumer. Look, there was a time not long ago where I was saying, if you sign up for every sports book in your state and you're in one of the top 10 states, it's an easy $5,000 in your pocket, just signing up, doing the sign up deals. And that was true. It was true. And then I always used to tell people the 3 peak times are the beginning of the NFL season, the Super Bowl, and March Madness. Those are the times when the sign up offers peak. Get in there then. Get your friends, get your neighbors, get your relatives, get everybody in there then. And last NFL start, it was good. A lot of good promos out there. $2,000 from FanDuel, $1,000 from DraftKings, so on. And Super Bowl hit, and the promos weren't as good. Now, we just had New York that had come online in January, and that was an eye-opener for a lot of operators. Caesars gave away $3,000 deposit match, and they lost like a ton of money on that, like many millions of dollars.
Well, I mean, people were predicting that they weren't going to give as good of promos in New York because of the high tax rate.
Right.
A lot of people who had taken advantage of that in other states, or guys who bounce around and do this sort of thing. And I remember somebody said that to me. He's like, holy shit, Caesars is like, they're just doing the same promo in this state. That's wild.
Yeah, and Caesars even said, like, we're just doing this to see if we can get market share, and they did for a week, and then they cut the promo, and the market share just dropped.
Sure.
And in New York, you can't deduct the cost of promotional spend like you can in some other states. So, like, it's a double taxation. Like, they lost a lot of money, and then they had to pay tax on sports betting. But so Super Bowl wasn't as great. March Madness was abysmal, I think. We're now seeing the prevalent
abysmal in terms of growth of users, or abysmal for what the CPA available was?
Abysmal for the consumer.
Okay.
In other words, for the promo hunter hustler person.
Okay.
For the sports book, they're just lowering their cost of acquisition, so it's probably good for them.
Okay.
What we're seeing is everyone's doing the bet $5 for this event that we know is going to happen, and you get $100 or $150 or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's a fixed cost for the sports book, and they have no variance involved in that.
Yeah, right.
And so it's now become like the hot way to do it.
Well, it's just at that point you really can control your cost per acquisition. Like if they sign up, and there's probably even a percentage of here's how many people forget to do that and take advantage of this promo.
Sure.
Like 98% of the people, we just are going to give them $150 to sign up.
Yeah. And it used to be like the deposit match or the free bet up to like $2,000. Well, probably only about top 10% of your users are actually going to take advantage of that for the full 2,000. And then only like 5% of them are going to know to do it optimally and bet it on a long shot or something like that. Most of them are going to bet it on something like a minus 150 or something like that. So really that $2,000 EV drops down to like $600 or less, and win or lose, and then it's more like it's a $300 loss to the operator. In other words, like they're lowering their variance in costs, and then they're also lowering the cost. And for the consumer, it's not as great anymore. Now, will it continue into the NFL season? I'm kind of hopeful that we'll just get one last bump for the NFL season, because really it's the NFL and then everything else when it comes to sports betting in America. Okay. And I'm hopeful that it'll be a decent action for consumers. Last gasp to those who missed the boat for the past 4 years in signing up or traveling around the country to sign up. Maybe your last chance to do it.
And I think some of the people they see and you've done good videos and answered questions about this as far as like the risk-free bet or the free bet and how to take advantage of it and figuring the actual expected value of it. And somebody who's only going to do that at one book, like it's fine and all theoretically, but if they're going to do it at 2 or 3 books, they might just end up losing money on that. And it's hard for them to justify like, oh, the EV was higher on that compared to, well, this one just gave me $150.
Right.
Like, I don't have to go find the best long shot bets to try to take advantage of this and worry about any rollovers. I'm just gonna lose this $150 this weekend.
Well, and keep in mind, guys, there's a ripple effect to this. Okay. There's a large affiliate business out there. There's a lot of sites that
of course
just function solely on affiliate income from customer acquisition. If customer acquisition cost for the operator goes down, that ripple effect down to the affiliate operator goes down. Mm-hmm. And now the valuation of those operators goes down. It's sort of like a depressing effect on the overall kind of macroeconomic view of the industry.
Sure.
Look, I operate a company and we don't do affiliate income, but like we're already starting to feel kind of the pinch of that the macroeconomic picture has kind of depressed a little when it comes to sports betting because the valuations are dropping.
I have a tough time making any declarative statements about the macroeconomic state of sports betting in the month of May. Like,
that's
it's not
true.
NFL is king times a billion in this. Realistically, like the scale is so different when the NFL is being bet than it is when we're tail end of the NBA playoffs. And because I feel like the volume players deposit at the beginning of the NFL season, play until their deposit's gone. If there's anything left at the end, they play March Madness. If there's anything left at the end, they play baseball or they play NBA. And then eventually they run out of money.
A few make it all the way back to September. The chosen few.
Sure. Yeah, they're firing away at
Winston.
They're betting Winston-Salem daytime tennis by the time they get to August. Because they're like, I can't believe
I've live bet hockey twice since we've been on.
Oh, I hope you haven't been taking Canes over because they are getting shut out in this one.
Yeah, this is a
Shesterkin finally shows up in the playoffs. Who would have believed it? So the comment you made, which is interesting to those of us in the content generation space. Last time we did this show with you, I don't know that I guess we were both starting doing daily content stuff, but hadn't really kind of figured out what was going on. We had just seen acquisition of DraftKings, of buying VSiN for $100 million, and like knock you out of your chair, like, excuse me, what? And and then believe me when I say the talked about thing of anything related to football, Super Bowl week at Media Row was how much money Pat McAfee was getting from FanDuel. Like that was like an eye-popping number. People were all kind of buzzing about that, and I'm sure that will kind of drive decision making in terms of content creation because they want that similar type of payday there. But I am struggling to tell you that it currently exists a marketplace for like an actual connecting there's a bit of a South Park meme feel to a lot of this stuff in the content space where it's like, we'll talk about betting to the consumers, ? Profit, right? Like there's like a little bit of a disconnect there. And, I definitely don't know if we are anywhere close to having a mature enough betting populace that, that they're seeking out and finding the voices like me and Andy on the deep dive or what you're doing in Unabated. Like, are we just like way, way, way early in all of this, and that's why I'm feeling that way, or is there really not an audience for this?
To both you, really, really quick, had a phone call the other day with a friend who older than I, has bet longer than I, but not in the same, like he bets football and then dabbles on some other stuff, just really loves betting on football. And he told me he recently took a different job where he has an hour-ish long commute every day. And he's like, have you heard of this VSiN? He's like, I listen to a lot of this VSiN stuff. He's like, it's really good. Like they get to talking about football sometimes. It's like decent like sports betting stuff. There's a whole pop. I think we're all just too close to like gambling Twitter and gambling stuff.
Oh yeah,
there's a big chunk of the population who is
an enormous proportion of my life. There's no denying this. But
yeah, I
feel
think
like
there's so many people who just haven't even
broken
found
through
stuff
to
yet.
virtually. Yeah, it's just incredibly hard to break through,
I told him
especially
I
in
had
today's
heard of
media day. And I guess I know what is your general feeling about, and as someone who has started a new business that is trying to attract a consumer and trying to kind of do things the right way in this space, like, what are some of your experiences and lessons learned and just opinion of the content consumers out there?
Drew, I think there is a market. Okay. I believe that there's definitely a market of consumers that eventually just get tired of losing and try to find a better way. When I was on last year, you actually talked a little bit about your journey as you were a losing bettor, and then you're like, well, I just got to find a better way to do this. So you started to look around yourself to find ways to get better at this. We live in a time when it's never been easier to find sports betting information. It's just hard to figure out what's the good stuff and what's the weak stuff. And the SEO battle is being won by a lot of the weak stuff, as it traditionally always is. And, I think eventually the cream rises to the top, and content that people really want will start to get absorbed better. I personally have found one of the biggest hurdles that I've faced is sometimes people are very protective of good content. In other words, if they find something that's enabling them to win, they don't want to share that with everybody because they're afraid that if everybody had this, then they wouldn't be able to win anymore. So it's like they may have a membership to a certain site that has great betting tools, but they want to keep that private to themselves. That doesn't help me at all.
You see that in like the fantasy industry. Like, why would you share if you find a fantasy analyst you like? Why would you tell your buddies who are in a fantasy league with you? Like it just dilutes the information. That's for sure a thing.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. But getting back to the original point I made, I think there's an audience. I do really believe it. Now, yes, we are in an echo chamber on Twitter. Look, I recognize it as much as anybody. However, we have people in our echo chamber that have 50, 100,000 followers. Now, not all of those followers are the same guys as the three of us who, get limited everywhere and they want to get sharp bets down and things like that. They're people that maybe just want to learn more about what this whole sports betting thing is. And in that sense, and I'm sure, Drew, you see it, you get a lot of exposure on mass media. Have you reached the point where you're recognized in public?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Neither have I, actually.
I went to a wedding in
You
May.
have to.
I went to a wedding in May, and some people did recognize me, but it was mostly, Kentucky Derby. A lot of people, but they were all, there was a lot of betting people.
I was gonna say, even I've had it. Like when I went to the golf tournament, my wife never lets me live this down. I'm Andy. I have a podcast.
I don't know. My general feel and read, like we have a couple hardcore fans, and they're probably all watching and or chatting in Discord, Patrick. And they rock. Like they care about this stuff, and they get something out of this that we're doing this for people like that who really care about it and tune in. But I feel like most of the people that I end up like reaching through all of the different media outlets I go through are, bookies, bookmakers, people in the industry. Like, I don't think I'm reaching many bettors' ears, really. And certainly no one that opened. If I'm reaching people that opened an account in the last 2 years and just started doing this, I think that's probably the smallest slice of the earballs that I run into. It's the people that those, if you are in that pool of new or even intermediate bettor, like you're listening to Pat McAfee and Colin Cowherd and like the mainstream, audience, the mainstream stuff that's talking a little bit of betting, but mostly sports still. And, it's like, I don't really have a good sense of what even the intermediate step looks like, where, the customer acquisition, getting the new people in is over. And now you have kind of an adolescent bettor, who's trying to get better and still putting money in the pot. I don't know if that's 5 years away, 10 years away, or, way in the future. But I know we're not close to there yet. And like realistically, for this stuff to grow to where we can reach a large enough audience that it has us, a bigger impact, I think we need to get to that point. And I don't know. I am losing a little bit of hope and faith that ultimately, if we just kind of continue to get reps doing this, keep our head down and do it the right way, so to speak, that it ultimately wins out and gets, the audience that eventually is seeking this at the national level. That's my guess, is that by the time we get to that point where all of the mainstream operators are willing to put a betting analyst on Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football or whatever at halftime, or do their own, tune into ESPN2 to watch the halftime breakdown from a betting standpoint. Like, I think by the time we get there, a lot of the people who have, already have fame and influence will have been like, oh, there's that much money available if I go pivot in this direction. And it will be, it will be those voices that ultimately get that opportunity, and they're not bettors. That's my general read on this.
Yeah, that's probably right. Like they're well-spoken hosts who are already in place that are willing to make the pivot. There's some that just aren't. Like, you can tell when they try to shoehorn betting content in with somebody who's not comfortable with it. Either, I don't know, the ones who you can tell are uncomfortable with it are almost worse than the ones who are just like, they didn't read the sheet. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Like, you can, if you bet this guy at, 2-1, you win $300, and that's with your stake back. Like, there's a lot of that where they're just not doing math right on TV. The golf stuff has been rough a little sometimes, where they don't understand, like, why would I bet at minus 125 100 to win $25? Like, that doesn't make any sense. It's like, okay. But I think you're right, but there is stuff out there that people want. It's kind of on us to continue to find stuff that's infotainment, finding better ways to explain some of I think we almost got to go back to some of the basics. Like, there is a really big dearth of just like people who ask really basic questions on gambling Twitter or in spaces you see people communicating, like, man, where are people finding like the basic info other than like, some pages that people put out, like how to bet on, on the DraftKings site or something like that. And some of that isn't very good explainers. Like there's some primers that need to be made. And then some people, like you say, that are at that adolescent level that, and I think you're right, though. So many people just fail. It's like Jack said, so many people just want to play the lottos and don't make it. They're not going to get to the second step.
Yeah, but here's the thing. A lot of that basic information, Andy, is SEO driven. And the SEO stuff is eaten up by all of the affiliate houses that basically just put canned information in and then say, sign up at this sports book. That sort of kind of just replicates the problem. Drew, getting back to your point, I think it's part of the evolution. And look, we're Americans. We do things in an American way. And I'm not trying to get too rah-rah about like American ingenuity and spirit here, but we are different than Europeans and Australians and other people in other parts of the country, the world. We have this innate sense in us that like, if we're given the opportunity to do something, we want to make sure we're better at it than other people. There's a reason why there are more Americans that have positions in the stock market than any other country's percentage of population, is because we like that. Oh, I can get ahead if I just pick the right stock, or I it's our biggest form of gambling that we have. And there's a lot of people that have looked into the stock market, and even though that is largely a zero-sum game, they want to find a way to get ahead in it. And so they do all this self-research and they look up all these systems and things like that. And sports betting's a lot like that, in that there's a lot of people that are looking to do sports betting and try to do it better than they've done so far or that their friends are doing and get the edge. And they are the ones that are going to be looking for sites to kind of teach them a little bit more than they find from the Pat McAfees and the Colin Cowards of the world. And that's sort of the audience that we're both trying to reach out to. I do believe that audience is out there. We just maybe haven't had that evolution of the American bettor to that level yet. Look, the soft book model in the US is still prevalent, but we know a change is coming. We know that even the big boys like FanDuel and DraftKings see it coming, that the consumer is starting to want more of this straightforward instead of this, always pulling the rug out from under them. And they want the more straightforward type of sports betting, even if that means that it's a sharper book that maybe they have trouble winning at. It's just the evolution of the consumer. The price sensitive consumer will eventually be here.
Okay.
And I'm trying to find this video. Only like 134 people saw this video, but that's where I'm still at a spot where I like what Jack says, and I think there is a spot for people that want to learn a little more, and I think I still want to give it to them because it was somebody here at the company who asked a question about a hockey bet. I think it was the Panthers in the first round when it was 2-2. He said clearly it's better to bet the 4-2 exact price or 4-3 exact price. I just bet both of those because they're both like plus 200 something rather than lay minus 140. And I just knew off the top of my head that like a book's not going to give you that. The 140 is probably better. And I ran him through the math, and he's like, you should do that on my little clip I'm going to do for my hockey bets tonight. We ran through it, and like that was some of the most enjoyable content I made in a while. It's like just running through the math of why that's a stupid bet. And he was happy too. He's like, he made a better bet in the long term. He made more money when the Panthers ended up. They moved on, right?
Yeah,
in the second round.
Yeah, they're in the second round. I agree.
And like that sort of shit, like that's useful, but it's hard to get that to the right people.
Yeah, I completely agree that if we're trying to make enjoyable content and that's ultimately the goal, then we're doing exactly what we need to be doing right now. Like we need to change course 0%. Like we are doing this because we have fun doing it, and ultimately, if anything else comes of it, Andy, you got a career out of this that I don't know that you would have thought it was, coming 5 years ago. Did you? Yeah. Similarly, like
go with the flow, Drew.
Yeah, similarly, like they NBC sent me to freaking Churchill Downs to cover the Kentucky Derby and the Super Bowl this year. Like, I did not see that coming 2 years ago. No way. And like, it's a cool experience. And like, ultimately, like, if that's all that comes of this, then fantastic. But I think the idea of like kind of guerrilla style breaking through to a broad enough audience that you can scale any of this, I have huge questions about. And maybe it's just the time in the cycle where we are way, way, way early on this because of just the fact that it's not legal in more states, and the states where it is legal and you have broad participation, it's all new bettors, and they haven't found us yet. That's all fine. But there hasn't been a ton of competition, frankly, for good content. There are like 2 or 3 other podcasts out there that are awesome, that I like to listen to, and it's nice to like be able to listen to like interesting conversations from people who actually have skin in the game. But like, ultimately, it shouldn't be as hard as it has been to break through, at the national level with some of this stuff, I think. And it's, I don't know. I am looking at a situation now where a year ago, NBC pitched like, hey, we're going to put you and Warren Sharp and Sarah on, a weekly football preview show and talk sports betting for an hour. I was like, okay, cool. And I'm sitting back thinking like, okay, this is definitely like an audition or something. Like, they're just going to see what works, what sticks. And next year, the Sunday Night Football, they'll tap one of us and, or rotate us through to talk betting on, Sunday Night Football or whatever. Now I'm like, that was absolutely silly that I thought that, because it's such a carefully curated property that even in like the post game show, they're barely willing to touch and talk on, sports betting stuff. And then I also look around and I'm like, well, there's a lot of other people who are higher on the totem pole at NBC right now that are starting to talk about sports betting, because they get that that's where the whole direction of the media industry is going. And by the time NBC does warm up to putting someone on air to do that stuff, there will be someone who is higher on the totem pole than me who is like pivoted into that space. And so I'm just kind of like, okay, well, I'm looking at it in a more rational.
But you'd still have your master's in engineering to fall back on.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, I wouldn't be doing any of this if it wasn't for the pandemic, because they would never have given me the opportunity to just flip on my laptop camera and throw it on Peacock like that. Without question, they would have been, hey, we're gonna need you at 5 a.m. down in Culver City to shoot this show that's going to be half an hour at 8:30, but you need you at 5. I'm like I can't do that and have a job. Like, there's no way. No, like, easily no. Yeah, but now they're like, hey, turn on your camera at 7:55 and we go live at 8. I'm like, no problem. Like, I can do that easy.
The pandemic did kind of change the dynamic of the creator culture here too.
Yeah.
I was looking at the thing, and I did want to make sure we got to this one, because we talked about shilling for sports books, and one that I shill for personally on the daily, not on the daily, we talk about them a couple times a week, is Profit Exchange. I know we have a couple things working. You're obviously more you can talk about this stuff just based on what you do and who you are, but also you live in New Jersey. Like, you're from out there. Like, what are your expectations? What do you think is going to happen with these exchanges? Because it's an argument I have with my boss sometimes. He used to send me, these promos he'd get from sportsbooks, because he's on every list, and it would be like WinBet had the half prayer, or the 105 juice or stuff like that. And he'd send me things, not theirs, but something like that, and say, like, he's like, do people give a shit about this? Like, are people excited? Like, oh, I can save, these people betting $50 on a bet, they can save $2.50 on their game they're betting tonight. He's like, nobody cares about this, right? And then, he asked me what I thought about the exchanges. I said, you're trying to sell the same kind of thing there. I mean, a lot of the allure of the exchange is being price sensitive, and they had a tweet the other day where they showed what their their odds would be on baseball games and compared it to the market. And I mean, if you are price sensitive, it is fucking staggering how low of a hold an exchange can have on some of these games. It's like, is it a realistic thing that you think actually takes off with the consumer base we've cultivated at this point, who's not price sensitive, or is it doomed?
Okay, so
yeah, 9 questions in there.
Yeah, so okay, price sensitivity, we know clearly that's an evolution of consumer. Because we have Nevada to use as our, whatever you want to call that evolutionary scale.
Yeah.
Do you remember when sports betting launched around the U.S., people in Las Vegas, the locals, were all like, wait, they're giving you $500 to sign up? There's no way we get $20 to sign up at William Hill, and they're doing $500 elsewhere. How can they afford that? Well, the reason that they can't offer that in Nevada is because it's an evolved consumer. The consumer knows that, like, if there's a sign-up deal that's worth even $10 VV, they're going to go do it. And similarly, if there's a Stations Casino offering Fridays minus 105 for 3 hours in the evening on the NFL slate, which they do offer, they get flocked. People are standing in line for 3 hours to place their sports bet because they're getting minus 105 instead of minus 110. The consumer just evolves. They'll eventually get price sensitive. And so will the exchanges be able to find price sensitive consumers at first? Probably not. New Jersey, we're getting there in terms of evolution, but we're not quite there yet. And, it took Nevada decades to get there. So I don't know how fast the evolution will go in New Jersey. But here's the problem with exchanges. I think they're going to be very disappointing to sharp bettors, not necessarily to recreational bettors, because I think the sharp bettor views an exchange as being, I get to become the book. I get to put up the price and some sucker bets into me. Guess what? There's no suckers on exchanges. I'm sorry. There's not. It's sharps versus sharps. And in the case of like Sport Trade, which is going to be one of the two that launch, you're not even going against sharp bettors. You're going against syndicates. And we're not talking syndicates like, a couple guys from Gambling Twitter that got together and share accounts. We're talking Susquehanna. We're talking Deck Prism. We're talking BlackRock. We're talking these hedge funds.
Jesus.
They're going to be the ones with the API access that can automatically move their lines around. They don't have to have somebody, moving the line and you're catching a slow move. They're going to be right on par with the rest of the market. So yes, there might be low VIG, but you're also betting into the sharpest price. You're probably betting into Pinnacle +1. That's what you're doing. So whatever the price is on Pinnacle, add 1 cent of VIG, and that'll be the price they offer. That's a standard exchange market maker move, is you offer the Pinnacle price +1.
Prime +1.
Now with Profit Exchange, you have a little bit more chance in that they're not going to go for the sharp syndicate in institutional money. They're going to go for the consumer money. However, there's another problem: is who are the consumers that are going to be attracted to the product are the sharps. It's going to be sharp versus sharp. There's not going to be a lot of square money in that pool either. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of money in that pool. Sport Trade, I think, is going to have a lot more liquidity than you would expect. But they're going to offer it in the same way that Matchbook kind of does, where it's like $20 at a time. Because what they're doing is they're speeding the plow towards price discovery. So they offer $20 at minus 105, and I take it, and they put it back up, and I take it, and they go, okay, minus 106 now, and I take it, and they go, minus 108, and I take it, and they go minus 110, and now they've just spent $80, which is maybe $4 of EV, and they have a sharper price. And even if they do that with swings in both direction, they're still basically finding their price discovery faster that way. And yes, you could have guys like Spanky out there that are manipulating the market and moving that price because they know that these $20 bids are going to move the market. But it's still, there's going to be other people on the other side that are going to pick it off and move it back to where it needs to be. That's what we've always seen with Betfair, is like that number gets hammered into place really fast. And I think that's what we're going to see in the US. So it's going to be disappointing to the aspirational bettor who thinks that now they're getting reduced VIG Yeah, you're getting reduced vig. But
somebody has to be on the other side. Those bets it's not the same as a sports book where this is the price. If you want, well, that's not always the case, I guess, is it now? But most places, this is the price. Here's the limit. Make the bet, and it's a bet. You need someone to match. And I thought I went through the same kind of thought process you did when I thought about it. I said, like, all right, you're not going to attract rec bettors. You're not going to attract real degens, scratcher guys. You're going to attract rec plus or sharp people, and they're going to have to go against other sharp people. And if it's, hey, this line, the price discovery is swung one way, nobody's betting the other side of that. Either profit exchange or sport trade is going to have to put their own liquidity into that market to make it liquid, or something odd's going to have to happen for those markets to exist. And I thought, like, what do people in Europe, really use the exchanges for? And you see so many people like trading tennis and stuff. I'm like, wow, that's not happening. Like, just it's the US. But and that led me to, like, I would market it as a live product, trading basketball, trading, a game like that with a lot of scoring, trading hockey, trading, trading NFL. Like, you'd have to market it as, well, it's low vig, but it's low vig for the whole game. All these live betting platforms, as long as someone matches you, all these live betting platforms, minus 20 aside, a lot of them, it's like, you want, here's the price on the exchange if somebody wants the other end of it. It's like, you can do this all day. You can trade back and forth.
And that is the advantage of a place like Sport Trade, who has market makers that are contractually obligated to offer betting all the way through a game, which I think that's a rule they're going to have to change. Like, they're going to have to offer betting with like 30 seconds left in the game.
That seems, nobody does that. That's terrible.
Yes,
but for them,
they haven't realized that they need to change that yet. I think they're going to realize that shortly after they get to market. But the point is, they will have markets being made contractually by their market makers, those Susquehannas and whatnot that are on the other side. Bet Profit might have a little bit more trouble with that because, as far as I know, they don't have anyone who's contractually making markets for them. And so it's going to come down to, is there somebody willing to put the offer and get it matched in real time before the market moves and before the betting should move based on the game state information. So
if I had to build liquidity if I was running it, I would just guess what? I'm injecting my own liquidity and then buying back at Pinnacle, and it's just going to cost me a little bit the whole time, like, to get it off the ground.
Yeah, no, I think that's viable. I'm actually very bullish on the exchanges. I know it doesn't sound it by what I just told you. I want to see how they work. I want to see how they act.
I'm excited.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah,
it's probably going to be interesting.
Nobody thought Betfair would work.
You're not in New Jersey, you guys
have definitely heard those stories. Like, nobody thought Betfair was going to work. Like, that was the long shot, and now it's massive. So,
and the dumbest part is, again, the whole interstate, the Wire Act and all that. What really stinks is, like, if they do work, they're going to have their own markets in each state. You can't at this point, we can't have a national exchange, which you want a good way to get a bunch of liquidity, offer it in 30 states, and the barriers to entry all over, obviously huge hurdles for that to happen. But boy, there's a good way to get liquidity. Just take your user base and 50x it.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a little bit specific question about your current journey at Unabated. Have you guys had to make any pivots in terms of your vision of what you ultimately want to provide since launching? And what should we be looking for in year 2 of the products you guys are most excited about?
Yeah, I think we've done a good job so far in targeting the market we want to target. If anything, we've decided we need to expand that target a little bit to pick up more of the spectrum of consumer that's out there right now.
Okay.
Once we started to make that odd screen, we realized people really want odd screens. Like, they flock to that.
No doubt.
And so we said, okay, well, what do they really need in an odd screen? Well, they need real-time information. That's one thing that's kind of lacking in a lot of these odd screens these days, with the exception of Don Best. And we all know that Don Best's what that product is these days.
Sure.
So we started to go that direction. But then we realized that, like, some people, they look at an odd screen, they don't know what they're really looking for. So one of the things we're adding into our odds screen now is sort of like an assist to their odds screen shopping. So pointing out the best price in the market, pointing out line moves, and even pointing out arbitrage opportunities and things like that. That helps the recreational plus consumer more than the aspirational sharp consumer. So we were previously targeting that aspirational sharp, and if we expand that to be the rec plus consumer as well, then you get a lot more feed in. Some of the things that we're working on, we've kind of stumbled into this idea of in-game betting is probably one of the best things that a sharp bettor can do and avoid detection in terms of being flagged as a sharp. The markets are moving so fast. No sportsbook is really judging CLV on an in-game market because the price is constantly moving. And so we've started to create in-game betting tools. And we have a partnership with Deck Prism where we can display their in-game line that they sell to sportsbooks. And we're the only place you can get their Deck Prism line right now. And we also have a real-time feed from Bookmaker. So between those two, you have two of the top books that have in-game pricing. And now we have these tools that you take the game state and you take the price suggestion of Deck Prism or Bookmaker, and we give you all the derivative markets in-game. So in other words, in the NBA game tonight, there's going to be plenty of alt totals and alt spreads that are offered. And you can at any time, click, get what should be the proper pricing on all these derivative markets. And I doubt any sports book is looking at that and saying, oh, our nose is wide open on this one. We got to be careful. No, they just feel like, okay, we put these lines up and then poof, they're gone. And we put them up again, poof, they're gone. And you can get down, several $1,000s if you want to, $100, $200 at a time throughout the course of the game. So we started this with college basketball, then we went to NBA. We've got our MLB in-game tool coming out shortly. And then Rufus and his data science team are already working on college football and NFL. And everyone knows that Prism's college football and NFL in-game pricing is like the top of the top. Pinnacle uses them now. And that's going to be really something, I think, come football season, is to have that as sort of like, if you're an in-game trader, it's kind of a secret weapon. Hopefully it's not too secret, because then people aren't going to share it.
That what you spoke to as far as, avoiding detection as someone who they might not want as a customer by live betting was interesting, because I almost asked the stupidest damn question. It was like, so I still think so much in the offshore world. Like, and I just don't have my brain switched over yet, because I'm like, well, they probably used a lot of third-party, lines for their live betting. Yeah, they use third-party lines for their regular betting too. It's just, yeah. So that, obviously that's a thing, but I often wondered that with some of the offshores. It's like, man, like you'd see 3 or 4 different offshores using the exact same setup for their live betting, or the one, the main one 5 Dimes used to have. It was at DSI and a couple other places. Mm-hmm. Like, are they even able to like see who's doing well on here other than just, ROI? Like, this guy won a bunch. And I think a lot of that is just viewed as luck, especially with the over round they put on that. So I always kind of thought about that. And then Drew, we found out that it wasn't always the case. I think it was my bookie that had some softer NBA live bets at one point.
Never heard of them. No idea.
Never heard of them. Yeah.
They
were done with you in a hurry.
Yeah, no. To pivot back real quick, I really loved your answer. The kind of major product that is not available out there is like the Bloomberg terminal for sports betting, and it sounds like you guys are working your way to getting something in that vein, which would be freaking sweet.
Cool keyboard too.
I don't care about that. I just
I don't know. Those are colorful. That's a status symbol. You got to get the unabated keyboard.
Yeah. Unabated keyboard. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a product that I think absolutely answers a lot of demand in the space right now for the people who we know, who, people listen to this podcast probably.
Well, who used to be the king of the live streams, Drew? Probably still is viewed as. And we've seen a lot of complaints about,
the king among bettors?
Odd screens.
Don Best, yeah.
Yeah, Don Best. I haven't seen anybody say anything good about Don Best in 2 years.
I don't think anyone uses Don Best.
Yeah, it's just
I don't know who does.
Certain books just stop posting there, and it's there's definitely an opening in that market.
Yeah. Look, and Andy, to your point, there are only certain providers of in-game odds out there. Don Best is still one of them. They put out this in-game odds product, and there's a couple others that different sites use. But yeah, for the most part, you can find the same line at multiple different books, which is another way you can kind of disguise yourself. You bet it here one time, you bet it over here another time, so it's not like you're focusing all your action on just one book.
You guys think about adding like a shopping tool for some of the exotic stuff, awards markets, futures, things like that? Do you already have that?
Yes. So we have the NFL season simulator, which then when you run that, you get your output and you can compare that to the current futures markets for everything from Super Bowl, conference, division, number of season wins, which is crazy juicy, not make playoffs, that sort of thing. And we'll even highlight where your projection differs from the market so that you can find your positive EV in your terms.
Something a little more, so like an application for someone like Andy or me personally, like, boy, this really feels like there's an angle on Dan Campbell, Coach of the Year. Like, what's the best price? Right.
So
like,
actually,
now I got to go open everything up, and every book has a stupid.
That's where my computer grinds. You can see smoke.
Or like somebody shares a nugget like, the favorite in the points classification at the Giro d'Italia just shot himself in the eye with a Prosecco cork. Like, go bet number 2 because he's going to scratch tomorrow. Like, it was literally like, if I had a quick way to be like, where is that up? Like,
can I bet that?
Like, I gotta get down now, like right now, right? Like, if they're like, because a lot of like the real heavy plus EV stuff that I've bet in the last 2 years has been random shit like that. Like
pretend Kentucky Derby.
Pretend Kentucky Derby is a good one. Draft props.
NBA 2K, NBA 2K tournament.
Yeah, just a roadmap of where things were that we could fire into across the entire landscape in the weird stuff.
It reminds me of those websites. This is maybe not the great. It is a good analog. Fuck it, Andy. This is a good one. Those what you like? Hey, there's a TV show that was on 5 years ago. And there's 90 streaming services now, and there's those websites like, where can I stream Mad Men right now? And it tells you like, oh, you got to go to Hulu for that, and then you fuck, I don't have Hulu, I have Paramount, and something like that. Who right now has MLB. AL Rookie of the Year up right now. Exactly. Everybody has it right now. But like 6 months ago,
French Open quarters, like, go up. Like, the draw is tomorrow. Like, it would be great to know, like, who opened that, when and where is it open? Because
the menus fucking suck at most of these books. You got to go digging.
They're absolutely useless.
Oh, if you could just scrape all the markets and have some way to map that out. I want this tool.
Where were you when you found out Ash Barty retired and that Iga Świątek was an absolute smash at every French Open out that was available? Like, like that, like having a screen that was like, hey, you can get $450 here and $5 here.
I wouldn't even care what the price is.
I wouldn't care, but I just want to know everywhere I could get it.
Told me who's actually hanging these markets.
Who actually has that open was going to write a bet on it. Yeah.
All right. Exactly. So do you guys want my answer? This is actually something we've thought about. We do have coming out this fall. We do have a props odds screen, which is very rare in the industry right now to have an odds screen around just props. It'll be just the NFL to start because it's tough to build these things out with all of the different machinations of things. But what you guys were just talking about is something, and I haven't talked to anyone about this. We brought on Peter Jennings, world famous DFS superstar. And one of the first suggestions he gave us, he goes, we got to get into awards betting. Awards betting's where it's at, and he's got a betting syndicate and they make millions of dollars. And so if he says awards betting is where it's at, then okay, and he's like, not only are these markets soft, but they're kind
soft until they're not.
Right. Well, they're also, they're also very influential. They get pushed about by just everything.
Reclick. Yeah, you can.
Right. So
you can wreck those markets. Yeah.
Right. So we've already started kind of planning out that how do we make an awards odds screen that is just all various awards per league and where they're at and who's offering what. And
I'd pay for that.
Oh yeah, same. Yeah, absolutely. And those are not those markets. There are some really sharp players who absolutely kill them, and when the steam happens, it's never like an accident. like that's sharp steam. Keeping track of that.
Weingarten with some of his baseball stuff.
Yeah, Weingarten,
Sure,
the Australian guys and New Zealand guys. Like those guys they are making moves in those markets that are in order to get down the size they want. It ends up taking a 5-1 to 100.
Even the ones they don't win, like
draft was the same way. He established the run guys in the draft.
God.
Like those guys released a freaking draft prop, and that thing was moving like $3. Like who cares if they were right? Like it was moving so much. But like some way of kind of having eyeballs on all that stuff would be really useful. Otherwise, you're doing it all manually. And then similarly, like this is really old like idea, and but it's not really that. I think maybe Action Network's the only place that has this or has done this, Bet Labs or whatever. But like just historical stuff, like in those small markets, like how useful would it be to have an MVP price, for the entire season at your fingertips, or to have every wide receiver opening and closing price.
We started that last year.
Yeah. Oh, you guys
we actually when we built some of our tools last year, we started recording prop prices right from there. So like through week 1 of last season we've got all of the various line moves with wide receivers and running back, whomever versus whomever and all that data. And we'll hopefully put that to use somehow, some way. One of the things we do is these simulators. So you come with a projection, a mean, and we'll run it through a simulator where you can get both the median price, which is going to be what a sports book would have, as well as tail events and, or other distribution events. So like if everyone's got Doncic at over under 33.5, but you find a place that has some alt line of 40.5, well, what are the odds that it should be? Well, based on what your projections are, we can give you what those odds are. And we have that for NBA and for NFL. And, we want to have that ability so that you treat it like an odd screen where you can say, look, this running back, let me see what his odds have been in past weeks going against similar opponents.
I get why that would be useful, but I can tell you that in the blind, the plus money side is probably incorrectly priced on all that stuff. The extremes almost always are incorrectly priced.
I mean, didn't AD say that on he's like, if you took Pinnacle's closers on running backs for like 2 years, and bet all the unders, it's like it was just a winner. Overall,
some of that stuff, the extreme plus money stuff is probably mispriced because they're usually not correctly filling out that distribution correctly. But what would be maybe much more interesting, it would be like, hey, here's week 11, all of the running back and wide receiver props, receiving and rushing receptions, blah blah blah. Here's when limits went up. Here's what moved. It was totally detached from any move in the market on the side or total. And like this is basically just in general what the market sentiment was, and at the time that people could get big time liquidity down. Like now that I'm sure some people do that by hand, but having having like a broader way of visualizing what's going on at any given time would appeal to people, I think.
What went through my head was finding, using Unabated's simulator, using a really good set of preseason power numbers, putting them in there, trying really hard to beat out any bias out of that, I suppose. And then taking someone's really, really good player level, for lack of a better term, fantasy football projections, and then marrying those and using previous data to be like, what kind of quarterback wins MVP based on this distribution of the results from the team and player level? Like what's left? Like who are the 6 guys at the end of the season who have the record, maybe above their baseline win total plus their stats that can win MVP? Some sort of like we do. That's kind of what we do for these award markets. You start crossing people off, be like, they can't win enough games. He can't get enough stats. He doesn't have this, that, or the other thing. Like I've always wanted to work out a way to semi-automate that, but that sounds very complicated now that I say it out loud.
No, that's the fun part of the handicap.
Yeah.
I'm the market side of it and the historical odds and what's moving.
How many people ask for that all the time, Drew, for every sport?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
hey, can you help me find like old
it's-
closing odds for tennis?
Oh my
Like,
God, yeah.
good luck, buddy.
Yeah.
Now we're
Sure.
racking up our AWS bills with all of the storage that we just keep dumping into the cloud.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what we'll ever do with it, but hopefully someday when somebody goes, I wish somebody had this, we'll be like, we got it.
Yeah.
And
Well, that'll be useful.
we'll,
All right. Well, we've taken up enough of your time. Appreciate all of this discussion. This was could do this for another 2 hours easily. But I got to go figure out who steamed that Mavericks Warriors total to 217. Best of luck getting that home, guys.
It's not looking great.
I got some great unders because I was like, I'm gonna wait until tip and see if this gets steamed, and it definitely did, but much more aggressively than I saw coming. But enjoy the rest of the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs. Andy, are you sweating live Canes?
Yep.
You got them to overtime.
Yeah, I know.
What is the
It worked with the Avs yesterday. Now I'm on a streak of just betting good teams when they're down.
If
the oldest trick in the book, buddy.
If we were watching live lines for hockey, what book would we be trying to keep an eye on, Jack? For sharpest live hockey line?
That's a common question on our Discord: is which books are the sharpest? I think our consensus, and here's the thing: I didn't know because I don't really bet a lot of hockey, but I asked Pizzola, I asked Dink, I asked Dom Luszczyszyn, and Andy McNeil, and they came up with which books are the sharpest. And I think the consensus is Bookmaker is the sharpest, but it's a blend, hockey, and Circuit is very highly rated.
But that's pregame, right, or live?
Yeah. Oh, for in-game. Yeah. I don't know. I can't say I've ever made an in-game NHL bet.
I base my in-game betting on who has the best trackers, like who has the best little picture of a hockey rink with the puck going, or the soccer dangerous attack.
Yeah. That 365 is always the fastest.
They are pretty good.
Although Andy was telling me Bovada was now the
Bovada's kind of good.
Oh, really? Live updates. So go figure. All right. Well, appreciate you again. Be sure to check out Jack's work on his Twitter at Captain Jack Andrews.
CapJack2000.
CapJack2000. Thank you.
Yes.
At CapJack2000. And of course, part of Unabated.com. Keep up the great work, man.
Thank you, guys. Always a pleasure. I'll see you next year. 5th anniversary is wood. I'm just telling you now.
Oh, okay.
So bring wood to the party.
Carve something.
Ooh.
Did you see me nod my way into the music there, Drew?
Yeah, that was good. I feel like home team overtime is solid in hockey. Is that a thing?
I don't know, man. I don't understand last change even in hockey. That's supposed to be an advantage for somebody.